is my capstone, senior capstone. This is like attempt 1 billion because of internet problems. So let's cross our fingers and pray that we make through it, make all the way through it. All right, Fishbowl images. Here we go. So the overview and flow. So the general goal of this project was to build a program that combined different software in order to expedite the time it takes a developer to start their environment and get their tools in order. We ran into this a lot throughout our college career, and a lot of us have seen this already in our professional career. It takes a lot of time for individuals, primarily us programmers and the IT individuals involved, to get all of our tools set up and in order and ready to go. And that's a lot of time and money wasted, which is not good. So the whole goal of this project was to kind of make this a seamless process that a developer could simply start up an environment in which they could immediately develop in. And that's kind of seen by this little flow. This was kind of the overarching flow. You log in, you set up the environment, you create a developer environment, and then you just simply develop. You start immediately. Hopefully we'll be able to see that today. So the user interface. This was kind of the first little piece that I wanted to really reinforce that goal, and through that build an interface that was lightweight and easy to use. The goal was to expedite the time, so very little things to fidget with, very little things to get confused by, and very little things to get stumped and held up on. That's why something like this image here is the user creation just has the username, password, admin, create user. That's all that is needed for that process. You don't need any, where do you put these files or what this, and this. Simply those three things. It's hard to mess up. So that's one of that. Then here's this view. This again reinforces the view, the goal and the idea of making this easy to use and take very little time. There's only the buttons you need, and there's only 4 of them. There's nothing else to distract you on the screen. It's very straightforward. Create the environment, view the environment, or log out. And then if you're the admin, you also see the admin view button, in which there are 4 other buttons on that page that are create the user, view the users, edit and update the global settings, and then back to this page, this dashboard page. So some of the technologies I use. Spring Boot, first of all, I chose because for several reasons. One, it's very easy to start a project and get it going. 2, it works very well on all systems. It's pretty robust. Java is a pretty robust language. It might be silly at times, but it does work pretty efficiently on mostly all the systems out there, which is good because this project turned into a primarily, if not exclusively, Mac piece of software due to complications I'll talk about later. And then, it's good for just the Java language in general for a lot of the behind the scenes stuff I had to do when it comes to issuing commands to Docker. And speaking of Docker, Docker is another technology, of course. This is kind of one of the main pieces that allows for the project to be easily repeatable and very reusable and very feasible when it comes to things like sizes and how much CPU it's taking up and how much space it's taking up and how complicated these are. This is kind of one of the unseen benefits that came out of it, which was all this stuff being contained in Docker makes it very small and very low footprint. So normally, you start up your IDE and it tanks your entire machine and you're sitting there for a while waiting for it to respond. You don't see that necessarily with this because of how low profile everything is. Then I use MySQL databases for simple persisting of data. This is stuff like the users, the environments that exist on the system, and then some of the global system information. All lightweight. MySQL is used because it's reliable and it's very easy to use in Spring and Java in general. And then finally, VS Code, more specifically Coder.com's VS Code in the browser image, their code server. That made things very simple because VS Code is lightweight. I was able to then put it in the browser, minimizing the things the user has to download. And there's tons of plugins and such that you can add to VS Code, allowing essentially infinite customization of your IDE. And it's very robust, and it's kind of on its little cutting edge for when it comes to lightweight IDEs. Now, integrating Docker. So this is kind of this is where I'll sort of talk about why Java was a great pick, because when integrating Docker, I had to issue commands to Docker from the actual program. This was pretty easy to do because Java was pretty straightforward. The only thing I had to figure out was things like needing to include the environment path variable, because of course it's all running in its own little space, so it doesn't have any of your local system path variables and whatnot. And this is all, of course, done through just simple command issues. But to run all of these, I needed to start new threads. I need to start new threads because as soon as I run a DrCompose up, which is a continuously needs to be continuously running in a thread, needs to be continuously running as a process, and I didn't have in a thread, it would simply immediately stop, which of course isn't desired because then my containers aren't running anymore. So each container and each development environment got its own thread that it's just running in, and you can see all those, and you'll see that in the demo. And it made it simple because I was then able to very even more cleanly separate all the different containers, which was nice. And then requiring information from the user. So this is where the user would have to supply Docker with a few things, or at least my commands with a few things, so Docker would be able to seamlessly integrate and work with the program. Things like the environment path variable, of course, so I can actually contact the user's Docker that they have downloaded. And then I also required a file path where they wanted all of these compose files to be stored, because then I could run from those files in the file path. And it kept everything separated, and then the user would be able to interact with those separately from the program if they so desired as well. So that's a little perk. DrCompose and Docker images. This is the bread and butter to the project. Again, this is what makes it repeatable. This is what makes it efficient. DrCompose allows me to combine a bunch of different Docker images in a single file, and then Docker handles creating all those containers from those images to my specifications. So I can specify things like ports, which I do through simple writing the file every time that and then copying it over to the file system. So that's how I would change things like ports. I just write to the file using a simple write command with a buffer reader and a buffer writer. And then, because these DrCompose files are highly customizable, I can plug and play different pieces, which allowed me to have all the different environments, such as the Spring and Laravel and WordPress. I could put in and take out what was needed. So, if the Spring file needed Tomcat or calls for Tomcat, I can put Tomcat in as the server, whereas WordPress has its own image for everything, which is nice because then I can plug that in for the test server. And then, of course, VS Code, the code server, is the same across all of them, so I don't change that, which made so all of this was very efficient. And then in that process, and Compose made it very simple to do that, even though you could do it without Compose. This made that process a lot easier on me and made it a lot more repeatable for users and less error prone. So some challenges I ran into. All these challenges weren't really challenges that prevented me from reaching my end goal, because I do believe I reached my end goal and I'm very satisfied with the end product. These are kind of just things that um, that made it so it wasn't perfect and it wasn't as seamless as I would have liked and whatnot. So first issuing commands to Docker. Um, these are all handwritten commands, and there's a lot to still be improved in that sector because while the commands are very repeatable and very similar and simple to do, there's a lot of them, and writing them by hand can always be a case where things get a little sketchy and possibly lead to errors. What would have been probably more desirable is if I had written a wrapper for all my Docker commands and used it as sort of an API and referenced that API instead. But because of time constraints, I didn't have time to do that, and I had to just issue the commands by hand from Java. But in the code, you can even see that it's all stuff that's easily made even more automatic. It's just a simple time thing where I could only make it so automatic. So it works to a degree that I am very pleased with, to where you put different variables in and it changes all that stuff for each container, but it could be better. And it was also just a little complex in the sense that I need to require the user to give me their environment path variable, something I really was looking to avoid because I wanted the user to essentially give me no information about their system or anything that would have been hard to find outside of the realm of, yeah, you simply just log in and start a container. But that unfortunately wasn't possible, which is nor here nor there because it still works efficiently. It's just I now require them to give me a file path and where they want these, and what their environment file path is and where they want these files to be stored. So still minimal requirements from the user. It's incompatible with most Windows machines. This isn't necessarily a me thing. This is kind of just a Docker thing that made it frustrating because it cuts out, half of my audience, essentially, half of my market that I can market to with a product like this, because Docker doesn't work on Windows machines that aren't the Pro Edition, which is very misfortunate because again, this cuts out on my market and it cuts out on people that would be able to use something like this. But for now, Macs work, so that's what I went with, and that's what it's been working on flawlessly. And then tightly coupled when moving code. So what I mean by this is the process of moving code is, again, those specifically handwritten Docker commands, which isn't a problem necessarily for things like creating containers and stuff. But when it comes to moving code, it does become problematic because it's tightly coupled to where in the files of each piece and part, both the code server and the test server, as to where those files get moved. So, for instance, if you just want like a WAR file moved over, that can become problematic because the command has to be written specifically for it. And if you don't have it in the place that I am looking for it with the copy command, then it simply just doesn't work. You don't copy anything over, which is misfortunate. So this could have been fixed, of course, with some auto deployment feature and integration, but did not have time for that, and that would have. And unfortunately, although the copy command works, it just wasn't as perfect as I would have desired, and as seamless and less error prone as desired. So for future improvements, first of all, cloud compatibility. This is something that would have taken loads of time, and I'm glad I steered clear of it early on because there's a lot of complexity that goes into that. But it definitely would be kind of the cherry on top for the project. So whereas the project is very seamless now and it works pretty flawlessly, cloud compatibility would have allowed the cultivation of a bring your own device kind of environment for this project, which is very desirable in today's market, in today's world, is a bring your own device and then it would have been widely used by lots of companies, I predict, something like this, but simply didn't have time for it. And it, again, would have been a cherry on top. It doesn't necessarily make or break my end goal, which was to expedite this time that it takes to actually start these environments. And then again, like I said before, Jenkins or some form of auto deployment integration. This would have made the process of copying that code over seamless and painless compared to what it kind of is now, which although the user doesn't see it, as long as they put it in the right places, it works pretty flawlessly. But if you don't put it in the right places, you can kind of be left scratching your head as to why the heck things aren't copying over correctly and why your test server isn't working correctly. And of course, that's why. So it's time for a demo. Let's really hope there is no pain, because you never know. So admin test, begin real quick with the admin. Let's go to the admin view. Like I said, this is all that's here. The edit settings, like mentioned before. Let me grab a quick window and just show. So the first one is the environment path variable, which is just echo path. Then you copy and paste and put it in here, but I don't need to do that because it's already in there from the first time setup. And then PWD for whatever path location you want to use here. I'm just using a temp folder in my projects folder. And then I also mentioned here, if you change this path, you can't use any of the environments that exist with the other ones. So because it references that file path. So if you change your environments, you won't be able to at least use them from the view of the user where they view environments and such like that. You can't do certain processes with them, such as the copying the code, but technically you can still access them as long as their Docker container is still running. So actually, let me go back. So let's do some users. As you see, I've done a lot of screencast already, and we're going to try to make this one the one that works. So and then we're going to make the password test, and this person's not an admin. And then we're going to go back to the admin view and view users, and here's Bob Joe. And then we're going to update Bob Joe because test isn't a very good password. We're studying to make it password. We're going to update that. And then we're going to go back. All right. And then we're going to go back again. And we're going to log out. And we're going to go to Bob Joe. Bob Joe. Now we're going to put in the wrong password, which is the test. Oh, failed to log in. Who would have thought? Oops, I think I typed it wrong. We're going to put in password, and that login works. Review some environments. We've got none, so let's go create some. First, we're going to start with this. We're going to call it landscaping, because they're ruining my screencast. Then we're going to go with 5011 and 3011 because I don't remember exactly what ports are used for the other one, just to be safe. So view the environment. Cool, those work. But I guess should be mentioned, if I'm making something like a Laravel 1 and I go that's Laravel, and then I go 5011 and 3012 or whatever, it's going to flag that the 5011 is already used. See, already port used. So then if I just go back and I do test Laravel, and then I do 5012, oops, 12, and 3012, actually let me grab my Docker dashboard so you can actually see how fast this is. As you see, landscaping is already running, but if I go start environment, I click over here, I almost didn't beat it. And this just shows how fast it is in, 4 button clicks and a few form inputs. I've already got this running, and I can go to it. So what was that? That's 112. So local 2012, and just like that, I'm in the code server. I can also hit up 5011 in a different code server. So that's just simply how. And then I've got other ones from other users in there from the test prior. So that just shows you how painless that is. And actually, let's do some more fun little tests. So let's just delete this. So that's now gone. And let's go to, I guess I should also show the actual test server running. Local hosts, let's do 3011. That's just the WordPress installation stuff. Okay, sure, whatever. Forget that. You can just trash this container anyway, so it's the beauty of this is I can just trash the container and then things work. Yep, just like that. Code server's all running, and then I can also show admin test. We go back here, we go to the admin view, and then we go to view users. And then I actually grab a full file system real quick. So here, and then go projects. And then the temp folder in here. You see we've got all these in here, and then I do something like delete this user. And just like that, if I refresh this, oh, it's because it's named different. That's not even a user that's still in there. Let's delete Corey. This one, immediately gone, and none of the containers that were created by Corey exist anymore. As well as you can't log in as that user now. So let's just log out and try that. And password for the login, because that user does not exist. So it's pretty top to bottom. You can interact with all of these simply like you would normally. I'm not going to go all the way through it because this is already a long screencast, but if I were to open a project or whatever, this is again where the copying happens. This is why it's so kind of not as desired, because it's in a poor location, in my opinion. But I don't have enough time to do much about it at this point. And here you can just type all your regular commands, like git clone or whatever. It's gonna yell at me because I don't have everything, but as you see, it puts up all the git stuff. So that's how git commands work and whatnot. And then I can copy it all over here and make it look like whatever, and then test on here, which is pretty cool. So that's kind of the whole project. And as you can see, the most important part, of course, being how fast those containers spin up. It's mere seconds, with very little to worry about. is the most desired part of it all, is how painless of course it all is, and how fast, because so there's that login, and then you simply, so you're logged in. That's two form inputs and one button click. Then you go create environment, pick. So that's a form input. Uh, that's then you pick your port. It's 13. No, that's used. I guess I think it's used. No, those aren't used. Okay. You hit those, hit success, and just like that, you got test SP up here. It's already started. I couldn't even pull it over fast enough. That's how fast it is. And then you can instantly go to it. Localhost. Oops. An extra 0. Instantly go to it. I can't even type fast enough. And it's ready to go. And it's one of those things where it's like, that was the whole goal of the project, and I'm very proud of how fast that was. And then it's in here, and it's all lowercase because that's important. You can't have cases, so I had to do stuff like that. But yeah, it's very, very simple, very fast, very efficient. I'm very proud of it, and I thank you for my time. We made it through the whole screencast this time without any errors or internet going out, so that's cool. And that's it, I guess. Thank you for your time.